2. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Buildup class. This is class number 9. It is, in theory, our last class together, and I've enjoyed doing it. And I hope we've been able, Aaron and I've been able to make it worth your time and worth your while. We're very lucky today to have 2 special guests. One is Julian Leonard. He is the director of community development for the city of Rockland. Rockland's about 35,000 people, about 30 kilometers east of Ottawa, and it is booming. And we're going to hear Julian talk about what they've done to make the city such an incredible force in so many different areas. And I think they're actually becoming a leader in so many ways. So I really look forward to hearing from Julian. After Julian, we're going to hear from Rebecca Simon. She is an appraiser. And I don't have to tell anybody on this call or the people who will be listening to it as a recording how important appraisers are to getting projects finished and completed. If you get a decent appraisal from somebody who's qualified like Rebecca, it opens the gateway to financing of all sorts. And that includes equity financing as well as debt financing. And if you don't have a good appraisal, that often could work against you. So we're going to hear from Julian, and then we're going to hear from Rebecca. And then if we have enough time, I did promise everybody that I would do at least one more business model today. And I'm going to show you a business model that I really like, based on, actually, it's not popular these days to say it, but it's actually based on a Russian business model, how they use and develop agricultural lands and have done so for almost 100 years now. So the fact that it's a Russian model, please, just take a breath, all right? And we'll go through that right at the end. But first, we're going to start with Aaron. So Aaron's going to take it away here in about 15 seconds, then Julian, then Rebecca, and then maybe a little bit of overtime today from me. All right, Aaron, over to you.
Hi, I just want to say one thing. I was watching Aaron's video before this one, and he was talking about 5 Blackburn that you renovate. I just want to tell you, I actually went inside that building during COVID because all the offices were selling the furniture. I was just grabbing some furniture, and it's beautiful inside. It's so stunning.
Yeah, that's 2 years of my life. It's the headquarters of Heritage Canada, and it's probably the most interesting building I've ever worked in. The staircase there is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
Oh my God. Oh yeah. Oh my God. It was amazing. I was very impressed. That's all I want to say. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's so nice of you to say, Ida. It's beautiful. All right, Aaron, I made you the co-host. You can share your screen.
Here we go. Can you see that okay?
We can. Just if you can make it full screen, that'd be great.
I will do that now.
And remember, everybody, if you have a question, put it in the chat box. And Aaron likes getting questions, and hopefully everybody else, Rebecca and Julian, will be okay with that too.
So, guys, I decided to do a little bit of something different. I diverted from what Bruce had put in there. I will get to what I was thinking about in terms of some of the coaching stuff I do, but I've been making notes throughout the course of the last 9-10 weeks on things that kind of popped into my head as I was talking or as I was listening or reading the chat box. And I thought it'd be a really good time to kind of, for me, do some summaries of some of the stuff that was out there that I thought I maybe left loose ends on, or things that I knew were really solid questions. So these are just like, my mind works in point form. If you ever see an email from me, I don't write in paragraphs. So this is kind of how my mind looks. And I just want to go through a couple different things that I thought were really important. Being an owner on a project, a developer, renovator, anything like that, I made a bunch of notes on things that I think you should consider having and continuing in your toolbox, so to speak. The first one is a truck. If you're going to get in the development business, I was at a meeting this morning with Woody, and we had this conversation. My business partner, Brad Cartwright, drives a stupid little BMW, and every time he needs to pick something up, he has to borrow my truck, and it drives me crazy. Every minute of every day, you need something that can pull, haul, load, get dirty. And that doesn't matter if you're the project manager, the owner. There's always a time where a truck is super, super healthy. It's deliveries, it's rentals, it's all that kind of stuff. I think simple tools are very important to have. I would tell everyone to have a simple toolbox. Actually, I would use a backpack. That's what everyone does now. I made a list of everything that I would have in my own personal toolbox that I know will get me out of little problems here and there, where maybe the electrician forgot something and I can kind of make up for it. I put a link in here on the tools that I would have. You should have a simple drill, sawzall, some batteries, some flashlights. Most of the world is Milwaukee people, so if you buy Milwaukee tools, buy spray paint the whole thing. Otherwise, you'll lose your tools, guaranteed. They should always keep a couple ladders with you. It should be a 2-step and a 6-step. That means 2 steps up, 6 steps up. It'll be really helpful when you have to look in weird places. You should always be walking on the ladder. I put N95 face masks. You will end up in a room where there's drywall dust going or sanding. It just gets dirty and dusty. And even with COVID and people being sick, it's an important thing to have. I tell everyone to have a headlamp. It's the worst thing to go and look up and above an attic and not be able to see. And carry everywhere you go a big broom and a dustpan, because if you own that project, you're responsible to make sure it's clean and safe. I put in here home inspections. I'm not a certified home inspector, but I have done some fairly large home inspection projects. Actually, the owner of the 5 Blackburn property, I helped them negotiate an entire city block of downtown Ottawa. I did the inspection on a $12 million project. It was tons of restaurants, tons of apartments, and I inspected the whole thing over the course of 3 days. And so what I want to do is kind of talk a little bit about the home inspection side of this business and the things that I would look at if I was you, and I think the things that are really important as you're going into potential purchases. Always go to your inspections. I can't stand it when people don't show up. You should be an active part of it and make tons and tons of notes. The home inspection business in Canada is regulated, but it's kind of a joke. They work off of standardized forms. At the end of your inspection, you're going to get like a 400-page binder that no one ever looks at again. And really what it is it's spreadsheet management. They just go through and say, check, wall painted, wall not painted. But when you're there during the inspection, you will talk things through. You will have a lot of conversations. Those are the important things that he'll be mentioning. I always bring a flashlight. Go on Amazon, buy a moisture meter. They're like $40. It has 2 little probes on the end. You can stick it into anything, walls, floors, and it'll read moisture. So if you're ever worried about like damp basements or things that look like they're damaged, you put it in there. It'll give you a moisture reading and it'll tell you right off the bat if there's a problem. I would buy a thermographic imaging gun. That's the kind of laser that'll show you heat, cold, all that kind of stuff. Bring a golf ball. It sounds stupid, but if you have a bad foundation, you put a golf ball down. If it starts rolling, it'll tell you where the foundation has its flaws. It's actually unbeatable. I have laser levels that do not work as well as a golf ball. And bring a tape measure. Always go early. If you can find neighbors, talk to neighbors. They have tons and tons of good information about the leak that happened 10 years ago, why they changed the roof, and they're happy to talk about it. And I cannot stress this enough, and this applies to everything I do in construction. Pictures will always be your friend. You can never have too many pictures. They'll document what it was when you bought the property. They might save you down the road. Maybe you end up into some situation where you have to sue someone because they didn't disclose. Pictures today are time and date stamped. Take pictures of absolutely everything. And you can also refer them back to, if the roof looks weird, you can send it to a guy like me, to a roofer, and say, is this roof going to last? And then the subject matter expert can reply and say, you got 1 year. So put that into your purchase price. I just want to go through a couple of the important key metrics. So exteriors, I always start from the outside in. You walk the entire property. You're always looking for grading, and grading means slope. So water goes downhill, which means at your house has to be the highest point, and the grade should move away from your house, ideally towards your neighbors, or at the very least to a ditch or to some drainage sections. I look at roofs, eaves troughs, sidings, and windows. Simple things: peeling shingles, damaged shingles. If you're looking at windows, you're looking for fogging in windows, bad caulking. Siding is really easy. Look for bulges in siding. It happens either during bad installation or moisture. It'll tell you there's a problem on there. And the eaves trough, you have to make sure it's sloped correctly and the downspouts are moving away from the house. Water does more damage in our country than anything else. Bad eaves trough, cracked foundations almost every single time. The older houses we'll look at brick. You'll make sure there's relief holes at the bottom. You're looking for flashings, and you're looking at visual inspections. Decks and fences are easy. Shake them, see if they move. If they move, you're going to have a problem. And then driveways and lots, same thing. It's how many parking lots do you have? Can you get into the backyard easily? If you're going to do renovations or you're going to build back there, can you actually even get back there without craning it? As I go into the interior of the building, I look at a couple of main things. And I know it's not my job, but the way I look at home inspections is my job is to explain the things that will cause you problems. I don't care if the kitchen's pretty. It's completely irrelevant to me what the flooring is or the bathroom. I'm looking for things that will fail. I go up into the attic, measure the thickness of insulation, take a tape measure, drive it to the bottom. The thickness of insulation will tell you how much R value you have. When you're in the attic, look around the perimeter. What you're going to be looking for is light. If you see light, that means airflow can flow in and exhaust out. It means your roof line is healthy. On the electrical, and I'll have some pictures coming up, look at the panel, check for space, look at the type of panel. If you have a thermographic imaging gun, you shoot the panel with it. If you see hot spots, it will tell you there are faulty breakers and possibly overamped and overconnected wires that can lead to fires. That thermographic imaging gun in commercial spaces, you have to keep your insurance on larger commercial buildings, they shoot it with a thermographic imaging gun once a year. And that'll tell you there's loose breakers, faulty breakers, bad wiring, and it will save tons and tons of problems. Look for knob and tube. I'll show you a picture of what that looks for, and look for aluminum wiring. Those two are big money, big problems. On the mechanical side, take a look at all of your mechanical equipment. Take pictures of the model and serial number. In your serial number, it will tell you how old it is. So it doesn't matter what the homeowner says, the serial number never lies. Ensure what you have for fuel types. In this province, we have some oil still. We have a lot of propane, gas, and some electrical. In order of expense, oil is awful. Propane is right behind it. Then you're going to electrical and gas. So if you have an oil tank, you got to figure something out because it's going to cost you a ton of money. When you look at ASHRAE, the American Society of Heating and Refrigeration Engineers, furnace and ACs are good for 15 years. Hot water tanks, 10 to 15 years, 10 if you're in the country, 15 you're in the city, and HRVs are 15. So when you figure out the age, you're going to know when you have to replace them. When I look at plumbing, look for cast iron or galvanized. Metal plumbing is not good plumbing. You can tell when you tap it with a screwdriver. If it clangs, you have a problem. Foundations and floors, what you're looking for is cracks, efflorescence. Efflorescence is that kind of white, weird powder that shows up on walls. You're looking for bowing of walls. And again, that golf ball will tell you everything. If it rolls like crazy, you have a problem with your foundation. If you check this top left-hand picture where my cursor is, aluminum wire is all labeled. Actually, every wire in Canada has a label on it. If you pull the string of wire out, it will tell you two really interesting things: the type of wire. So in this case, AL stands for aluminum. And about 5, maybe 10 years ago, they started date and time stamping the wire. So from an inspection point of view, I can tell you when things were done. And then if you don't have an ESA permit, I can tell you that they were done outside of the permit by the age of the wire, if that makes sense. This picture over here is knob and tube. It's really easy to find. This is in an attic. If you have it, you're going to change it. This is dating back pre-50s. You won't find a lot of this anymore. And anything you don't know, get an electrician. Have him double check. This picture here, this is an oil furnace. Oil furnaces are really particular. You'll notice this green damper, they all have it. They'll typically have an oil tank that'll be outside, and the furnace itself is massive. You'll have a bunch of plenums. They're very easy to tell what they are. This is a heat pump. That's a wall-mounted heat pump. This is a ceiling cassette, and they actually make heat pumps that go in ductwork. This is the cat's meow. You guys have heard me talk about this extensively. If you have this, I'm super happy. That's blown-in insulation. These are air baffles. This is what allows the air to come across the top and go out through your venting. If you have this, you are in great shape. You take your tape measure to measure it. You start at the top, go down till you hit something solid, and depending on the thickness, you'll know how much insulation you have in your attic. Adding blown-in insulation is one of the cheapest things you can do. There's rebates for it, and it'll change the way your house feels and breathes. This is cinder block foundation. That is efflorescence. Efflorescence comes when moisture is passing through concrete. It'll indicate that there is a water problem somewhere. What that is that's the calciums and salts that evaporate after the water passes through the concrete. You see this on walls in particular, you have a problem. You see it on the floor, I wouldn't worry about it as much. It probably means you have a high water table and some water's passing through. Administration and bookkeeping. As some of you are moving down the avenue of these larger projects, I cannot stress how important this component is. It probably will save you more money than a guy like me ever could, because the money is in the details. The money is in the receipts and the accounting. It always is. Make sure when you go into these projects that you have some version of a plan for your support structure. If the plan is you have no plan, it will probably fail. Wherever possible, I would go for in-house support. Taking track of the money and making sure it's running is a business. It really, really matters. One of the really easy ways you can do a lot of that is credit cards. Accountants love credit card bills because they're detailed bills. I use credit cards for everything as a nice match. I haven't paid for an airplane in like 15 years, but that's a whole different thing. If you have a business credit card and a personal credit card, do not mix them. It confuses accountants. Business is business, personal is personal. The ways I found support in the bookkeeping industry: retired clerical and government workers. They're often looking for part-time gigs. This is right up their alley. There are bookkeeping services that'll come into your office or into your house once or twice a month. They can do it as well, but find a plan for this. I put in here assistant in quotation marks. What we've done in the past, and I don't know if it's super, I don't know what it is, but we've actually invented people, assigned them an email address. If you invent a person, in particular on the property management side, you invent a woman. Men don't yell at women. It's just a fact. So whenever I've invented a person, I've called her Susan or Clara or whatever that happens to be, and she'll run interference for me on things like that. So make sure if you don't have an assistant, I wouldn't tell you what to do, but it's not a bad idea to have a virtual assistant. Construction draw appraisals. I know we've kind of touched on this a few times. I'll show you an example of a draw appraisal next. They're really, really, really important. Bruce has touched on this concept. The preparation of a simple slide deck is something I've implemented over the last little while. I detail with pictures, notes, the units, the floors. I think it's partly my job to make my case to get the best appraisal possible. If you get underappraised, you will be out of money. It's a simple fact. When you move into this, what we call the missing multi-family, that 4 to 10 unit, there's not a lot of appraisers that do it, or if they do it, they don't do it that well. And maybe Rebecca will talk to that as well. But most of the people we use, it's kind of like a little sideline of their business, and really, it's really important to yours, not as important to theirs. One of the things I started doing too is building my own budget at the front end and using that as my appraisal tool. You'll see the slide coming up next. It's super oversimplified. It misses tons of details. You don't get to draw on things that cost you a lot of money, and that's a big problem. Every time I send these slide decks, I include copies of all the city inspections, electrical inspections, TSA inspections. You're just trying to, again, make your case as profoundly as possible. These people entirely control the flow of money that comes into and out of your project. Be nice to them, book them well in advance. They're really busy people. And if you aren't sure if it's worth it for them to come out, you check with them and you just send them a couple of pictures, and they'll give you an approximation of, oh, it's only about a 4% draw. You might want to wait another week. They don't want to waste their time either. And these draws cost money. This is an example of one of the buildings we're building right now. And you'll see, like, we're talking about a 6,000 square feet. This is so simplistic, it makes absolutely no sense. It takes no into account. There's nothing in there for decks. It's very little stuff on, like, looking at how we're upgrading bathrooms and heating equipment and things like that. So I've taken this form and I now have about a 1.5 page form that has way more detail, and it's specific to the project that I'm working on. You will get better draws if you spend the time to do this correctly, especially at the front end of the project. And that's the time you're building your budget anyway. So you may as well put that into the future draw applications. I do want to talk about credit a bit, and how to carry large projects. I would encourage everyone, if you're going into a project, to start asking for credit today. Bump up your credit cards, bump up your line of credit, do it before you start the project. Do not mention to the bank you need it for a project. They won't be super happy to get it to you. Again, I put in there that I haven't paid for hotels and airfare in years and years. Always look for a card that doesn't cost you a lot, that gives you lots of air miles. Look at personal opportunities. That's where you get at the JV stuff, refinances, friends, RSP mortgages. We have people on the call that specialize in that. Look at credit opportunities from your suppliers and sub-trades. It doesn't cost anything to ask them, and typically they'll extend you terms. You will need credit at some point during your build. That is an absolute fact. Now, really, and this will be kind of the segue, 2 more slides and I'll hand it over to Julian. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I made some note, this PPP, this public-private partnerships. It's probably one of the things I'm most excited for, and I'm not just saying that because Julian's on the call, but it's something that is an opportunity that I didn't know existed to me until maybe about a year and a half ago. And I've kind of tried to outline what I think the steps are to kind of make this happen for you. Julian will probably correct me and add some stuff as he goes on. But, the step one, if you're looking to build a project or you have a project underway, find the ward you're in, find your local city councilor. Go on the website. They'll have pictures. Some of them will have their Facebook pages, but they'll always have a cell phone and an email contact method. And I believe in the city of Clarence, Rockland, I think these people are paid about $20,000 a year to do this. Is that right, Julian? About that, right? So most of these people, they all have other jobs. So I always send emails because I want to be respectful of the fact that they're doing something from 7 to 4, and then they're actually representing me and the rest of their constituents after hours. And their job is hard for what they get paid. It's a lot of work. When I have a chance to meet with them, I always go with a plan. And I think Julian will speak to this, but I always want to make sure that I'm showing value to the community and the city. It isn't a fiscal plan, it's a value-added plan on what I think that the development or the project can bring to the city. That is where you'll get buy-in. If you're going looking for money or reductions, things like that, it doesn't start that way. It always has to start with value on both sides. I put in there, have a list of items that would help you. It's never a list of demands. And it can be things like, it's really interesting what the city can do, and their back end is impressive. They do have some grants and they can do planning help. They can answer a bunch of questions, especially, some of the secondary and tertiary cities, the service level is amazing. So, but going with a plan is the starting point to making sure that's successful. And then I think the third one is probably the most important because, as you develop and you spend some time in particular cities, that consistency of messaging and staying on target and on point. If you're an eco builder, be an eco builder always. Don't jump in and out, because then you build a reputation for yourself, and hopefully well deserved. And then people from the city will actually start to reach out to you because they'll see the value you're bringing and the kind of projects you're doing. And then really, as we go forward, it's really important to understand what cities, and I use that in quotation marks, but what are they looking for? So then when you're building your plan, it should be customized to what the city considers important. One of the main projects that, and I think Bruce put a link into it, the Bourget train station, it's a really interesting project. It was brought to us about a year and a half ago, just over a casual beer. Actually, it was brought up very casually, and we were kind of asked if we'd be interested as a construction team in taking over what is about a 120-year-old building that the city owns and has been pumping money into it. I think you did roofs and furnaces and stuff like that, Julian, over the years. So you've been kind of pumping some money in, and they kind of said, would you be interested in running with it? And the city was able collectively to find a way to kind of give us the building, and they were able to find a way to get us about $450,000 of money to help renovate it. So again, I didn't know it was possible, but because of some of the other projects we were doing, it was a very easy sit down. And I mean, if someone's going to offer you almost $500,000 in a building, it's kind of easy to say yes, to be perfectly honest. So they've also been instrumental on assisting and on the planning on the yoga studio, Actually, we called the head inspector because we had some weird questions on accessibility, and he actually came right out and helped us answer some stuff that I wouldn't have been able to do. And we were able to get the permit in like 2 days after applying for it. So we were really pleased with that. We're looking at some opportunities to maybe partner with the city on some forestry on a couple 100 acres down the stream. The food truck we talked about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Julie and I met last night for a beer, and we looked at maybe putting a second food truck on their waterfront park in Rockland. And there's a bunch of other stuff that is new and exciting, and really that this becomes the perfect segue to kind of hand it over to Julian and to say I really appreciate everything he's done for us, and I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a very, very busy man, so I'm good for now, and I will get rid of my screen.
That was really excellent, Aaron. You went through a lot. Just before we turn it over to Julie and Rebecca, I mean, you're an appraiser. Did you think that Aaron made some strong points there on doing building inspections? And I thought, I mean, I learned some new stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So I tend to do some progress inspection reports that are related to construction draws. And I do find that when I work with builders who are willing to kind of provide a more detailed overview of what's been built or the percentages that have been constructed, that's been help with the draw. So yeah, it's a fair take, I would say.
Yeah, I thought so too. I thought it was really good. And on the building inspection side, there were some things that I haven't really, I mean, knob and tube wiring I've been looking for, but I don't think I've ever been looking for aluminum wiring. I'm sure I've come across it at some point in my career, Aaron, but I'm forewarned now. All right, so Julian, I made you the co-host so you can share your screen, and I'm really looking forward to hearing this. And just one last comment I'll make, Aaron, about the food truck industry. I think I've said on this in this course, and I've said to you, of course, as well, that one of the young men I coach had a fantastic food truck, which was very successful. It was just in a Home Depot parking lot. It was in a Home Depot parking lot. He was very successful. It made over $300,000 a year in sales. And then he added a playland, you know, some games like outdoor ping pong, giant Jenga, all kinds of fun stuff for kids and adults to do. And you remember what happened to his sales? They went over 400,000. It was incredible. And then he actually used his food truck during the wintertime as a commercial kitchen to do catering. And then I think he got close to $500,000 a year in sales from a food truck. So Julian, there's lots of potential, I think, in what you're considering.
Yeah, thanks. I agree. And I just, when I'll go through my presentation, there's just a few things I wanted to touch on also that was mentioned last week, which I thought was super relevant to, from the city's perspective anyways, and to what I wanted to talk about today. So just give me a quick sec, I'll share my screen. Just want to make sure that everybody could see that.
Yep.
Yeah, can you make it full screen? Just do the slideshow thing.
Yeah, I think it should be working now.
That's awesome.
Perfect.
There you go. All right. Well, first off, thank you for inviting me. I am really excited to be able to talk to you about the City of Clarence, Rockland, and about opportunities for investing, doing business, and what I think is the most important thing here is partnerships with or potential partnerships with the city. So today, what I want to talk to you about was give you a quick overview of the department, my department. Talk to you about two really important shifts or realizations that the city has made over time, and examples of recent projects, programs, and partnerships that we've been able to do over the last year and a half. Talk to you about sectors that the city is promoting and supporting. And there's two really interesting funding programs the city is working on and developing, which are going to be in line for next year, 2024. So just before I get into talking about the, I guess, city business, I just really wanted to touch base on a few things that were said at the last course. I was preparing notes for what I was going to say today, and I thought that there was some really, really interesting and inspiring things there. I also gained a few insights on some of the things that were said that was super applicable to public sector as well. So one thing that I really wanted, that I thought was really interesting, really wanted to touch base on was something that I think you had mentioned, Bruce. It was a statement that one of your friends or one of your colleagues had said. It was something along the lines that leisure is the new infrastructure.
So, Julian, when did you hear me say that?
I watched last week's course. I asked Aaron to be able to send me a link just to prepare my notes and just get a feel for what the discussions. And I ended up listening to the entire course.
Oh my gosh! Well, poor you. So, Julian, the man who said that, his name is Eric Kuhn.
Okay.
He was, unfortunately, he's passed away, but Eric was one of the world's leading architects. I mean, world class. He did the Titanic Quarter in Belfast. He did huge projects, the Darlington Harbor project in Sydney, Australia. I mean, he just did projects that are unimaginable in scale. He was a good friend, and I visited him. He was an American expat based in London, England, and I visited him. And visiting with Eric in London was a little bit like listening to oh my gosh, I'm going to forget his name now. The great philosopher who said the medium is the message, right? The global village, Marshall McLuhan. You knew you were in the presence of a great mind. You just didn't have any clue what he was talking about. And at some point while we were having breakfast together, he says to me, Bruce, leisure is the new infrastructure. I had no idea what he meant by that. And he explained it, but I mean, he was so brilliant, it just went right over my head. But about 2 years later, I was making a speech in Renfrew to the county, a keynote speech, and a few hundred people were there. And I stopped for directions. And I stopped at this little gas station that had been repurposed for a cafe. So there was a cafe, and where the tanks used to be, there were some picnic tables. So there were some picnic tables, and there was the station where you could go get a coffee and sandwich. Apparently, very good coffee, very good sandwiches. I just asked for directions. So I go into and meet the owner, and I introduce myself, and I said I'm kind of lost. And then I turned to him and I said, "Sir, did you know that leisure is the new infrastructure?" Now, at that point, he probably thought there was a crazy man in his store, because it finally dawned on me. He had this acre of asphalt out there, which he didn't need. And I said to him, if you were to put a volleyball court out there, or today, I guess, a pickleball court out there, and have some leagues play, maybe those people who are enjoying playing some kind of sport or some kind of playland thing might buy more coffee and more sandwiches and more everything. And that's what he meant, an investment in leisure activities, along with almost any project, institutional, office, retail, residential, multi-resident, industrial, almost any project adds tremendous value. It adds more value, Julian, than investing in another road, another pipe, another sewer, another water pipe. Leisure is the new infrastructure. That's how you develop your economy today.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. And that's why I thought it was really interesting, because I would say that, for a municipality, for the city's perspective, leisure is the new municipal infrastructure, essentially. And
that's beautiful.
And I just have a really quick story about that, if you allow me. A few years ago, there's like a prominent developer that submitted a subdivision application at the city. And at the time, that developer would rather give money to the city instead of transferring parkland, so cash in lieu of parkland. And he would say something like, why would I give the city land to develop a useless park when I could build 100+ houses on the same property? And recently, the same developer has submitted a new subdivision application. And I kid you not, the entire subdivision is designed around parkland, ponds, trails, community spaces, and a bunch of other leisure features. And when I asked him, why the change in heart, I'm going to paraphrase here, but essentially what he said was, well, because we've learned that buyers are going to pay for houses, more expensive houses, and houses are going to sell a lot faster when people can see themselves having fun, playing with their kids in the park, walking their dog around the pond, hosting an annual barbecue under the community gazebo. And essentially what he was saying was leisure and having fun sells, right? And that is a really, really good lesson. That is a lesson that the city has learned over years.
This is fantastic. All right. I can't wait to hear the rest of the presentation.
And the last thing I'm going to say about that is I guess, a theme that we're going to talk about today. And that is something that is now a strategic priority for the city. So just want to touch base on that. All right. So I'm director of the community development department. I've been director with the city for about 5 years, but this department is relatively new. It's been created in this existing form anyways for about less than a year and a half now. And so my department is responsible for planning, land use planning, economic development and tourism, recreational and cultural programming, events, daycare services, and social services. So I have to say, I truly believe that I have the best position at the city. I am super, super fortunate. I'm really fortunate because we have a city manager at the city and we have council that believes in what our department is doing. And they've mandated me, or they give me a clean or a blank canvas, and they've mandated the department to being creative, thinking outside the box, and to break the mold when it comes to service delivery and when it comes to doing business. And I have to say that I quite enjoy breaking things. So the last year and a half has been a really fun ride. And we've pumped out a crazy number of new projects, of new programs, of new initiatives in the last year or so. And this is one key concept or one key thing that I want for you to take away is that this has only been possible because of the partnerships that the city has been able to establish. And so two really important shifts or realizations that the city has made is that one, the city is a facilitator. The city needs to be a facilitator. It cannot and will not or cannot be the only actor in realizing its strategic objectives. So I'll give you a really, really simple scenario. We were talking about Parc Lavigne a bit earlier about the potential for tourism, creating tourism there. So let's say that we wanted to develop that park into something like Gatineau Park, for example, where you'd have some tents, some yurts, and people would be able to rent and stay overnight. Before this realization, the way that the city would have approached this project is we would have hired maybe 5, 6 resources, and they would have been responsible for the maintenance, the planning, and the booking, all that stuff. They probably would have done a really good job, no doubt about that. But the problem is that that's probably the only thing that they would have been able to do. And so when you take a step back and you look at that, you say, well, our priority or our objective is to increase tourism. And so how we achieve that? By making that the sole effort or the only initiative that city is able to deliver? And the answer is no. So city's roles, in my opinion, and that's what our city is working towards, is we need to be facilitators. We need to ensure that we create an environment or help to create an environment where businesses are able to deliver these services. And it's way more efficient for the city to work with partners, with businesses to deliver these services. And so that's what the city has been doing. And I guess that's the second takeaway, is that the city depends on partnerships to be able to achieve its strategic goals. And so I'll just give you a really quick example of some of the projects, recent projects that we've been working on, and programs and partnerships. And so the first one is rec programming. So just want to I guess elaborate on this a little bit. For the last 15, 20 years, the city has not had any programs of its own. And when my department was created, one of the first things we looked at was we need to give residents something to do. Residents need to have fun, leisure. And one of the first ways to do that is to create programs and camps. So with a handful of staff, And with less than 7 months, we were able to create over 45 programs and camps. And just to give you a comparison, I don't know if anybody is aware of Dover Court, but Dover Court is a really, really well-established, well-run facility, and they've been doing this for years. And they have somewhere around 90 plus camps and programs, but they've been doing this for years. So within 7 months, we've been able to do something, maybe half of what they've been able to do over many years. So I think that is really impressive. And we've done this with a handful of staff, but with well over 20, 25 partners. And so these are 25 new businesses for the most part. Some are existing businesses, but 25 new businesses that now have a market where they can exist and are partners with the city. We've partnered with the Outaouais Film Festival. So we gave grants and in-kind contributions for them to host their festival or part of their festival in Clarence Rockland. We're working on a super, super important project that Aaron had talked about earlier, which is the restoration of the train station. I think Aaron was kind of kind in terms of the city's management of the building when you were describing the city's management. To be totally honest, this is a building that we've unfortunately have not been able to do anything with and completely let deteriorate. And so we've been able to establish a partnership to be able to renovate that, to give it a new life. And this is now a super, super good tourism opportunity and a really good, it's going to feed into the local business economy as well. It's something that the city would never have been able to do on its own. Another really significant project is we're working on transforming the city's waterfront. This is a long-term vision. I don't know if anybody is aware of Clarence Rockland or has been aware of Clarence Rockland for a while, would know that for the last 20 years, we have said we need to develop our waterfront. And we have yet been able to do anything. So this year, we formed a partnership with investors, with developers, and we've developed the long-term vision together. And together, we're going to transform the waterfront. This is game changer for Clarence Rockland. We're talking about private public marina. We're talking about amphitheater. We're talking about boardwalks for many kilometers. We're talking about a bunch of restaurants and community spaces. And again, this is only going to be possible through partnerships. We've partnered with a community garden. We gave contributions, again, financial contributions for a non-for-profit organization to be able to start a community garden. In the past, this would have been a city initiative, and we'd have to have a lot of resources to manage this. With $10,000 and a bit of in-kind, we have a community garden that the city has no effort in maintaining and needing to invest time into. And we have a bunch of lease agreements with businesses and restaurants for patios, pop-up restaurants or pop-up businesses, for beer gardens, that type of stuff.
Julian, may I add a note here?
Go ahead.
The company I work with had a contract with a small township municipality where they had, I think, 19 or 20 extraordinary, beautiful parks. Baseball diamonds, parks, all kinds of amazing facilities, some of them waterfront as well. And on the most beautiful July weekend you could ever imagine, myself and one of my colleagues, we went around and we photographed and videoed. I think there was, like I said, 19 or 20 of their parks. Over a 3-day long weekend, there wasn't a single child, not a soccer mom, not a single person in any of those parks, not even the waterfront. Why? There were no facilities there. The boys might be okay with going, in the bushes, but the ladies are not. In addition to that, there was no place to get a tea, a coffee, a sandwich, a snack, no place to go to the bathroom. And it was consuming 20% of their budget to maintain these things. 20%, that's a lot. And they were doing a great job of maintaining it, but they had no active uses. So it was an obvious thing to do, which is to suggest what you in fact are actually doing. Lots of lease agreements, active, whether it's a food truck or a million other different kinds of things that you can imagine. So the town council was all in favor of it, and they got really enthusiastic. At the next election, the mayor and the 4 councilors were all voted out of office because the residents in the area thought, oh my God, they're giving away our parks. And so to this day, they still are spending 20 or 22% of their budget on these parks, and they are still completely unused, even though we have very short summers and not a single person there. What makes Rockland different? Why is it that you're able to get, I guess, not just your council on side, but you have to have the citizens on side as well?
Yeah, well, like I kind of just alluded really quickly, is I think we have a city manager, we have council that are, I'd say, have a lot of vision in this regard, and who have allowed us to be able to think outside the box. We approach it in a very community-oriented manner. Like I think Aaron has probably talked about a few projects that he was involved with and partnered with the city. And our approach has always been what's good for the community. And our business model is a lot different in the sense that we're not looking to make profit. The city is never looking to make profit. So, for some people who are saying like, wow, how could you give away land? But in reality, what we're doing is we're leveraging our assets. We're allowing people to use our land, but in return, they're providing a service. And that service is often a service that the city would never be able to provide, or not be able to do it in a fiscal, responsible manner. I would probably burden the tax base way more than if we allowed these agreements or allowed these partnerships to happen. And I think that we've done a good job to communicate that, and our community and our residents, I think, understand that. And I don't think that this is exclusive to Clarence Rockland. I think this is something that a lot of cities have either realized and are working towards, or some cities are already there and ahead of us in that regard. So I think it's a question of, discussing with your community and making sure the community is engaged and understands the objectives.
Thank you.
And just on that piece, like on the community garden piece, like that was a underutilized park. Same scenario. It was a huge park, never used. And I'd say the community was older community, so an elder population, and there's no kids in the park, and this is a huge park. So we have now a community garden which uses up that space, which is I'd say the clientele is probably more that that age, that population group. So now they have a service that they're able to benefit from that, and it's cost the city nothing. Actually, it's reduced our operational costs because we don't have to maintain that much of land anymore. So it's really beneficial, and it's really understanding that, and our council does, which I'm really fortunate, because it makes my job a whole lot easier.
That's incredible. You've got not only political support, but also community support. My oldest son, Andrew, is a senior economist in the Australian government, and he has studied community gardens extensively, and he has a lot of experience in that area. And just to support what you guys are doing in Rockland, he tells me that your ROI, your return on investment for your time and effort, if you're participating in a community garden and you're growing your own fruits and vegetables, nuts, whatever you're growing, it can be as high as 1,000%.
Wow.
There's almost nothing in the world that you can point to that has 1,000% ROI. But if you have some tomato seeds and you plant them and you keep them weeded and you give them a bit of water, the ROI on your time and effort is, and the few seeds that you bought is something like 1,000%. He's a pretty good economist, so I trust his judgment.
Well, and we have like a community market, farmers market. So now this garden has a place to sell those vegetables. So it's just in terms of, it's one project that just kind of feeds into another project that we've been involved with. And I know that was kind of one of the themes that you guys have talked about in the past also. So it's very applicable to the public sector as well. So that's just a really quick example of some of the projects. I mean, there's many more, but that gives you a good idea of what we've been supporting and which projects we've been working on. And so, like I said, well, essentially, I was talking about my example about, or when I started off there with the example they gave about the developer, and I said that was a lesson that we've learned. I would say if we had a slogan like the United States, make America great again, ours would be make Clarence Rockland fun again. And what that means is that what we are promoting, what we are supporting are any initiative that is in line with that. So anything that has to do with tourism, either a business or initiative, anything that has to do with event planning, programming, an initiative of that type, we are heavily promoting and supporting. Anything that has to do with leisure development, anything like that. I'll just move this over here for a second. And anything that is, a business or an industry that has the potential of creating jobs. And I have an example of a quick example here of support that we gave a business, an industrial business, which was a pretty important industrial business in Clarence Rockland, and they wanted to expand and build a new building, a new facility. And they came to the city and they said, we really want to stay in Clarence Rockland and we want to be able to expand, but we don't own any land. Is there anything that the city could do? And so again, we looked at what we have, what assets we have, and what we'd be able to offer. So we sold the land that they needed, and we sold it at cost because we are not in the business of making profits. And we've helped them plan their project because we do have a really good administrative team, and we help them with timing, we help them with grants, we help them with permits. We were able to streamline the entire permit process system for them. And they were able to, they had a really time constraint, and they were able to build that building. It would probably be a project that would have taken somewhere around 3 years. And they were able to build it in less than 2 years. And that is like the type of things that a city could do. And so anybody, whether it's in Clarence Rockland or any other city, if you're building something, if you are developing something, I would encourage you to reach out to the economic development team, to the planning team in that city, and see what they can do for you to help you out. But anyways, then there is a really big opportunity in the next few years for Clarence Rockland outside of the waterfront development. We are developing our business park. This is a huge area west of where the Walmart is along the 17. And so we're building a business park, and we are going to be looking for partners, investors, builders, developers, and any business owner that would want to relocate their business in this business park or help the city develop the business park. And so this is another area where a city like ours or any other city would be interested in partnering and looking at what they can do to support businesses. So the last two, I guess, really important things for us is that we're working on, and this is not exclusive to Clarence Rockland, but a lot of cities are working towards this, and some already have these types of programs in place. But we're working to two really interesting funding programs. The first one is $100,000 in annual grant contributions. This is in forms of funds, so money or in kind. And this is geared towards seed funding, so for new tourism businesses or initiatives and new recreation events and programs, festival, something like that. We want to create the next big beer festival or something like that. That would be a grant possibility, anyways, to apply for that grant. And this is annually, and then the other one is $150,000 annually, which is going to increase incrementally over time. And this is for a community improvement plan. I don't know if everybody knows what a community improvement plan is, but this is a great, great tool. Again, if you are developing in any city, one of the first things I would check is, does the city have a community improvement plan? It's a really, really good opportunity to get funds through that. And this is tailored for existing and new businesses. And most good, I'd say, CIPs have more than one stream. And the streams that we are looking to develop are streams for entrepreneurship startups, improving or expanding existing businesses. Example of what I mentioned earlier with that industrial business, that would be an example of the supports that we gave there. And anything that has to do with along the main streets, beautification of important buildings along the main street. So with that was pretty much what I wanted to cover. I didn't really talk too much about Aaron about the process, but I'm happy to answer any questions regarding or relating to that if you wanted me to, Aaron.
Yeah, I think people would love, well, first off, thank you very much for doing this. And I hope that everyone's really paying attention to realize that this is a cooperative conversation. This is not the city pushing or kicking. They're asking for help and they're looking for partners. I think it'd be amazing if you could kind of explain the sequence of like, not necessarily how someone get hold of you, but how they move down the process to get to some of these really high-end, interesting initiatives.
Yeah, well, so I really believe that you know, you need enough crazy ideas to kind of come together to create a really, really good idea. So I would say that anybody who has any, you know, idea about wanting to develop a business in any of the fields I've talked about, there's two things you could do. You know, you mentioned, you know, getting political support, which is one avenue, and which is a very important avenue. But I'd say in terms of administration wise, you'd want to reach out to your the city that has, they either have an economic development department, or they will have a planning department, and you need to reach out to them first. You need to understand whether or not this project is viable. You need to understand whether or not there are supports the city could give you for this project. And you have to look out for cities, in our case, that are actively searching partners. We are offering land. We have assets. We have lots of land that we are offering to developers or to partners that want to do something out of it. And so there's huge opportunities for stuff like that. So you want to look at whether or not cities are you know, offering that type of stuff. Once, go ahead.
Julian, I have a question for you, if I may, but I cut you off. I apologize.
No, that's fine.
So I have a question for you. You're talking about developing a new industrial park in Rockland, which I think is a terrific idea. And knowing you a little bit now, I'm sure that you figured out that industrial workers like to have fun just as much as everybody else. And so adding some kind of a playland, you know, a bocce court, a pickleball court, you know, barbecue area, you know, horseshoe pit, whatever, that will pay big dividends for your industrial park. I get that. But I have something else I want to ask you, which is a little bit more controversial. Would it be possible, and I'm just asking, and you can throw the idea away after the call is over, but would it be possible for Rockland to have part of your new industrial park, part of it, a separate part, where people could both live and work? And I'll tell you why I say that. You go down any rural road in Ontario, or Wisconsin, or Pennsylvania, or Montana, or the Dakotas, or Saskatchewan, any rural road, and you will see hundreds, thousands, maybe for all I know, hundreds of thousands, where you've got mom and pop living here, and in behind they're building kitchen, you know, they have a little warehouse where they're building kitchen cabinets, you know, or mom and pop live here and they have an HVAC company. I get anywhere from 3 or 4 to sometimes 5 or 6 calls a month from people who want exactly that condition. They want to be able to have a house here and their workshop or their warehouse or whatever, you know, so they can live and work in the same area. Obviously, we're not talking about petrochemical plants. We're not talking about explosives, armaments, you know, heavy industry. We're not talking that. We're talking light industry. But yes. I suspect that if Rockland designated part of their new industrial park for this kind of development, you would attract a hell of a lot of entrepreneurs from Eastern Ontario because they cannot find that condition.
Yeah, and that's really interesting that you mentioned that, because I think our business park design is quite different than most, in the sense that so a big portion of our business park is, well, it first of all, it is business and light industrial. And a big portion of our business park, the front end of it anyways, is for residential housing. Not single detached housing, because we have a very healthy stock of that in Clarence Rockland.
Yeah.
And so this is right at the outskirts of that development. And then where we've positioned this, it feeds into a really, really big residential development. We're talking about over 3,000 houses that is going to go up in the next 10, 15 years, which is about less than 500 meters of walk from the business park.
So what I'm showing you on my screen is, this is my friend Nick Catchmore. He runs a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning company in Kempville, Ontario, another small town. And this is his house. And then in behind the house, you walk maybe 30 meters, and he's got his workshop here. I mean, the number of people, the number of entrepreneurs that I talk to who want that kind of condition is out of control. And I'm just one person.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to put that in your ear.
Yeah, mixed use. Yeah, like we are looking at mixed use in that that development, and there is a not the entire business park is mixed use, but there are some areas where we are allowing for mixed use, and we have a lot of you know, I'd say leisure features designed into the park also because of what you've just mentioned. And I mean, this has become our strategic priority, or one of our strategic priorities. So we're building this into everything that we can, and we see the value in doing that. So even the business park, we're expecting that there's going to be parks. There's going to be, you know, a lot of anything that is leisure related developed directly into that park also.
So Jordan, you should be paying attention to this too, because I think Belleville should be adopting a lot of the. Jordan is from Belleville, Ontario. Should be adopting a lot of the ideas and suggestions that both Aaron and Julian have covered today. It's amazing. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, all these small towns need to move in the right direction, and I think that's happening. So I know we have our own CIP program here as well, which is very beneficial to the establishment of our economy here, which we want. So
and these businesses are sustainable, you know. I mean, people are talking about generative AI replacing people like me, you know. Maybe they will, but it'll be a long time before a generative AI will come and fix your plumbing.
100%. Until we got robots walking around.
Even you, Jordan, might not live that long, you know, to see that happen. So Julian, I can't thank you enough. That was unbelievable. Just before we let Julian go, and you're welcome to stay, of course, if you want. But if you, I know how busy you are. Are there any last questions? We got a thumbs up from Woody. Any last questions for Julian?
I have a quick question. How often do you release your plan?
Which plan? Sorry.
So your strategic plan for the year, is it an annual report that you kind of put together and release? And
well, like the way that we normally work is like most organizations, we have a strategic plan, and there we outline our strategic priorities.
Yep.
And from there, we have a few other, you know, strategies that kind of fall out of that. So depending on what it is, so like I was talking about our waterfront vision that we're developing. So that is a plan that we've worked on recently, but that touches into one of those strategic priorities. In terms of economic development, we have an economic development strategy that we've developed recently. And so that's reviewed annually. That is, you know, promoted. That is things that we reach out to the business community and you know, investors and that type of stuff. And our approach is always to make sure that we're serving, you know, the community that we're aiming for. So businesses in this case, and we'll reach out to them and we'll say, does this work for you? Are we, you know, addressing any of your concerns, any of the needs? Are we essentially meeting the objectives that we set forth? And so yeah, so I don't know that I answered your question directly, but we review these annually. We communicate them as often as we can. We reach out to the public that, or the group that is identified as being stakeholders in that domain, and then we reach out to them that way.
Is it listed on the website? Like, could people find this information?
We are working on our website. Not everything is on our website. We are working on our website, trying to get all the information up there as quickly as possible. But we're not there 100% yet. So in the next year or two, I think that everything's going to be up there.
Amazing.
All right. Well, okay, Rebecca, unmute yourself. Turn on your
All
camera.
right.
All right. So we're very fortunate now to be able to hear from one of the gatekeepers of our industry, and you know, it's my job. Rebecca's one of my go-to appraisers, and for many people on this call and others, she is a go-to commercial appraiser now. So Rebecca, over to you.
Perfect. Sounds great. I'll share my screen here. Let me see. Okay, can you see that okay?
Beautiful.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm here today to talk to you about the appraisal process. Specifically, I'll focus on multi-residential and mixed-use property. Before I get into that, I want to introduce myself. So my name's Rebecca. I've been a member of the Appraisal Institute of Canada since 2020. I'm currently working towards my designation right now, so I'm a candidate. I'm working towards my PGCV as well as the accredited designation for the Appraisal Institute of Canada. So today I'll be talking to you about the appraisal process. When working with a lot of clients, we work with people from who are owners or buyers, sellers, lenders. So there's a lot of different perspectives when working with different types of people and managing different expectations. So just to start things off, a little fun joke here. So this is what someone may see their house. You can see beautifully landscaped, nice garden, beautiful home, whereas different perspectives, the lender might see it in this view, whereas a buyer, might see it still as a nice building. Of course, as an appraiser, we look at it from a critical eye. So we might see the, issues or different perspective on the property. And then of course, a tax assessor, always overvalues your property. So definitely when we deal with different clients, it's a lot of it is managing expectations and obviously looking at the market to really understand what the value of the property is. So today I'll go through the appraisal process. I've had experience working with all different types of properties. Like I said, today we'll focus on multi-residential and mixed-use properties. I've worked on low-rise apartment buildings, duplexes to fourplexes, all the way up to large high-rise multi-residential properties. Also industrial, office, retail. So if you do have any questions about other properties as well, we can happy to discuss that. So really the purpose of a real estate appraisal generally most of the time is to define a market value. So really understand and provide a value of what the subject property is. So like I said, it would be what the value of a property is in a seller, between a seller and a purchaser in an open market. With an appraisal report, there are several different kinds. So a full narrative is generally the standard with a lot of commercial properties, those large multi-residential, mixed-use properties. We also do for smaller residential, like single-family dwellings, duplexes up to fourplexes can be done on a residential form. Like Aaron mentioned, sometimes those forms aren't as detailed. So depending on the complexity of the property, sometimes it is best to do a full narrative report to really get a full understanding of the property. And then we also do short narrative appraisals as well, but that is not as comprehensive as of course, a full in-depth narrative appraisal. Typically, appraisals are done for commercial financing, lending. That's what a lot of times we work with our lenders to provide an appraisal report. But of course, there are many different various reasons why an appraisal would be completed on a property. So we'll go through a little bit of the contents of an appraisal, and then I do have a case study that I can share as well. We'll go through kind of what's involved in an appraisal report. So usually at the front end of the report, because we are governed by the Appraisal Institute of Canada, we're governed by some uniform standards. So they're called Canadian Uniform Standards of a Professional Appraisal Practice. So all those definitions are added at the beginning of a report. So if you get a full narrative appraisal, you'll see all the definitions laid out at the front. That's something that we are governed by as part of the institution. So we need to explain all those different topics. I'll touch on those later during the case study, but just outline here is what's the first front end of the appraisal. From there, the front end of the report also gets into the property details. So of course, before we get into the analysis of an appraisal, we go through all the property details. So that's everything from who owns the property, what the site looks like. We do a full overview of a site analysis, some important things depending on the type of property. We can look at our site coverage, which refers to how much of the property, the site is covered by the building versus excess land. We can look at the quality and condition of the site improvements. Parking may be important for some commercial uses. So those are all factors we look on the site. We also do description of improvements, so analyze the construction of the building. For multi-residential and mixed use, we focus on unit mix, quality and condition. So all those components are outlined in the front end, the description. And then of course we analyze the location. So we really want to understand where the property is located, how it affects value. Of course, we're talking about industrial parks. So if you know, industrial is very hot right now. Focusing if it's located in a large industrial park, of course, that's going to bring up the value. So all those are discussed during the front end of the report to then help with the analysis and to come up with a value later on. From there too, we also do touch on every appraisal, with few exceptions, is discuss what the highest and best use of the property is. So what we typically look at is what the highest best use is as it currently is, and also as vacant land. Really what that means is we want to make sure that whatever properties on the land conforms with the zoning of the property, is the most financially feasible. So really making sure that whatever is on that property or on that site is the highest and best use of what could be on the site. Once we've discussed all those aspects, the really big chunk of the appraisal that we really get into to understand value is the 3 methods of valuation. So we've got the cost approach, direct comparison approach, and income approach. We'll focus specifically in the case study on the direct comparison and income approach. Those are typically more used more often for those types of properties. The cost approach is something that generally is used more specifically if it's a newly constructed building. Part of the cost approach is focusing on depreciation of a building. So a lot of times if a building's really old, it's hard to understand or really put a quantifiable number on how much depreciation has been added to the building. So cost approaches generally focus specifically on new builds and also special use properties. So if there's properties that, you know, there not a ton of that type of property is sold in an open market, sometimes we will use the cost approach to determine a value. But today, for this purpose, especially since we're touching on multi-residential, mixed-use properties, we'll focus on the direct comparison and income approach, and I'll go through that during the case study, what steps we take to come up with a value. The end of the report is the reconciliation. And so basically we bring those values together and kind of determine what the best value is based on our analysis. Today, the case study I want to focus on is a mixed-use building located in Belleville. Now, this is mixed use, meaning that there is both commercial and residential aspects. So we'll get into all the details of the building, but basically there's commercial on the ground floor and residential above. We'll talk about kind of what the components of each residential and commercial and how those tie in together into determining the value.
Just before you go on, Rebecca, of course, everybody knows this building because they've seen it in this class before. This is the building that my wife and I have been renovating for the last 250 years. It seems like 250 years, 2.5 years. But I wanted to point out that we called it, we returned to the original name, the Burroughs Building, and we even gave it a tagline. And I just wanted to make sure that people know, if you have a multi-res building or mixed-use building, give it a name and give it a tagline. And that's, you know, it's kind of neater and cooler to say I live in the Burroughs Building than I live at 249 Front Street. And then the tagline is "It's all happening," because it's all happening on Front Street. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so what I had the opportunity to inspect the building, and it's coming along great. It looks great in there. So we'll go through the details a bit more. Before we get into that though, just from appraisal process, when clients come to us, really the first thing we do is request the information about the property before we really dive into the appraisal. And so this is some of the information that we ask of the client. We need to get, especially from an income producing property like a apartment building or mixed use, we do want to get information about the income. So what the rents are, we usually ask for a rent roll, and then in some cases, a copy of the leases to verify that information, understanding what those annual operating expenses are as well. And then additional information about the property. Sometimes this is a little bit more difficult for the client to uncover, like site and survey plans or building floor plans, especially if a building is quite old. A lot of times there are no architectural drawings that are existing anymore. A lot of the paper trail is gone. So in those instances, we're able to find other ways to verify the information. But this is just information that helps us along the way when we come up with the value for the property. And so here's some examples of information we received specifically to this property here. So we've got some drawings, elevation plans, a survey, so we can see what the site looks like. Understanding the size of the site is important. What we can see floor plans here. We've got one for each floor. That really helps with not only just understanding what the floor plan is, the layout is, but also if there's measurements on the building, we can get a sense of what the sizing is as a building as a whole, but also the size of each of the units. We also received some rent rolls as well. So we were able to review that. This will be important when we get to the income approach. So we can go through, understand the type of lease it is, what the rent is, any provisions. So that all is detailed in the lease. And so that helps with coming up with a value for the income. And some more rent roll information. So with this appraisal, because it's currently undergoing renovations, we were tasked with coming up with a market value of the lease fee interest, because there are leases bound by the property. We based it on a lease fee interest. We're coming up with two values. So we've got the current market value. So this is as is what the property currently looks like, how it's operating. And then there's also a prospective market value, meaning what the value will be once the remainder of the renovations are completed. Those are the two values that we came up with for this report. We also sometimes do a retrospective value, which is values in the past. And so depending on what values we do come up with, we of course change our strategy. Current market value, we look at the building as is. With the perspective, we try and find comparable sales or use the income, the leases of the future rents and incorporate that into the value as well. So just a summary of the subject property here. Like Bruce said, you guys are familiar with it, but I just wanted to get into it a little bit and go through the details. So this is what we would provide at kind of the top of the appraisal, just kind of a quick outline of all the details here. So we've got the municipal address. Now thinking about it now, I should have added the name of the building. So I'll add that next time to the appraisal report to add a little fun tidbit for the lender. We've got the location, legal description, site area. You can see it's zoned general commercial. So once we get to the land use provisions, we'll be able to see that likely it conforms with the zoning. We also have a bit of information about the property. So the existing improvements, it's a 3-story mixed-use building. We've got 2 commercial tenants on the ground floor. We also do have a residential tenant, and then we have residential above. With the proposed renovations, I was also outlining here what's going to be added in to the building and also apply to the prospective market value. The gross building area was derived from on-site measurements. So we do measure the building to get a sense of what the square footage is. We also confirm that or support that by various different details, whether that's the floor plans that were provided. We can also grab it from MPAC. So there are different various ways, but we find that really the best indicator for the size of the building is doing those measurements. But if you do have drawings, those really do assist in providing supporting information about the floor plans in the area. And a really important, especially with the direct comparison approach, and you'll see that, is understanding what the square footage is of the building. And so that's a really important piece because that's how we value the property. And so really getting an accurate understanding of what the size of the building is important for the appraisal. And then last but not least, the site coverage. So the building covers about 61% of the land. So some key points here about the building that are important to note to understand the building and to attribute to the value. So it was previously purchased in September 2020 for $280,500. There's an additional 200,000 or 2,000 square feet of usable space in the basement. So we do attribute that and we do change that. We do make adjustments if there's a basement or not, because that is usable square footage. It's not included in the above grade square footage mentioned on the previous page, but we do have, we do include that as additional square footage that is a positive attribute to the building. So it's a historical building. It's a concrete structured triple brick building, nice high ceiling heights. So that really attributes to the building as well. And its location is located in a really growing area. We've got Prince Edward County close by, which is growing, and Hastings County in general has been growing. Specifically noting from the pandemic, a lot of people are moving outside of the city and moving into smaller cities. And so with that, of course, there's noticeable demand for commercial space, residential space, and that, of course, in turn then attributes to the value because there's more demand, more need for these types of buildings. And major recent and ongoing renovations have been completed to the building. So typically during the description of the improvements, we do like to list out what those renovations are. And sometimes we even put a dollar value on it if there is some sort of construction budget, because that's important to note in terms of the quality and condition of the building. And this is just a little overview of what the unit mix the building is. So when we deal with mixed use properties, especially multi-residential properties, unit mix is a key factor. So of course, if there are, there's an apartment building with all 4-bedroom units versus 1-bedroom units, but there's this same number of units, the 4-bedroom would likely have a higher value to it. And that's due to likely the larger unit size, higher rental rates for those larger bedrooms. So unit mix is something that we definitely consider when making those adjustments and determining value. So once we've gathered all that information, we've analyzed the property, we've analyzed the market, we will get into the approaches to value. So like I said, we don't typically do the cost approach for these types of properties, but direct comparison is something that we definitely do focus on as one of the approaches to value. So the first thing I do in every property is do a search for similar type of properties in the area. So I did do a search for Belleville properties. But if you had been sold within the last year or so, I tend to like to stick with a 1 year, 1.5 year time frame. So I didn't go further back than 2020, the beginning of 2022. But what was noticeable was there was a lot of properties in Belleville that were in a lot poor condition compared to the subject property. So they did sell a lot lower compared to what the subject property likely is worth. And so a few of those properties were selected because it's in the subject area, but adjustments were made for the quality and condition of the property. So a big component there is the construction, the quality. Sometimes it is difficult to compare quantifiably what that number is, but if making an overall adjustment for quality and condition, we can do that. looking at pictures, looking at MLS listings, and kind of comparing it through that way. I also was in Belleville and had the chance to walk around and look at those comparable sales and get an idea, you know, even with the facade, the exterior, you can see that the quality and condition wasn't comparable or wasn't the same to what the subject property was. So because, you know, there wasn't a ton of sales in the Belleville area that were usable, we focused then on looking at outer markets. So in the surrounding area, I really tried to look at similar size mixed use properties that were in similar condition to the subject property. So I use 6 sales. Usually we try and use between 4 and 6 sales and analyze those, and then of course make those necessary adjustments. The biggest ones, especially for this property, were location, quality and condition, and unit mix. And so once all those adjustments were done, what we do, going back to the gross building area, is we determine a value based on a unit of comparison of a price per square foot. So to make kind of even the playing field, you know, some may sell for a lot lower versus higher because the building's a lot smaller. What we do is we do a price per square foot, which really brings the range down, and then we can determine a unit rate of the amount and add that to, or apply that to the gross building area. Once the draw comparison, we come up with a value, the next step is to value it from an income perspective. And this is a really important approach because this is an income producing property. We do rely really heavily on this value. And so the initial step was to gather all the income that the property produces and also was going to produce once those renovations were completed. And so as you saw previously, we received all information about the rent roll, we got the leases, we were able to analyze that. And there was still some vacant units left in the space, but we do value the property based on full occupancy. So we had to go into the market and look at market rent and see if that, if the market rent aligned with what the rents were of the subject property. And if not, then we would have to make adjustments with the capitalization rate, which I'll touch on in a second. But we also had to use that market rent and project it for those vacant spaces. So once all the rent was determined and we had a rent roll, we came up with a gross annual income. We also added on any additional income as well. So any parking that was charged, any storage, lockers, those were all included in additional income. From there, we do always apply a standard vacancy rate to the gross annual income. This is something that's typically standard across the board. We do change the percentage of vacancy based on the type of property. And so we used a 4% vacancies as a standard for this one because typically we'll use a lower for residential, but a higher for commercial. So we used a blended rate to come up with that. Once the vacancy rate was taken off, we then had to deduct any operating expenses. And so this comes back to the information that we gathered from the client. So we got all the details there. Of course, we also look at market expenses too. So if utilities are extremely high or property insurance is a lot lower, we try and stabilize it and project it so that it's comparable to the market. With repairs and maintenance and property management, you can see here, we use this again, a standard kind of application to determine it. This is something that the lenders, the banks typically request of us. So we, come up with an expense amount for repairs and maintenance of about $500 to $1,000 per unit for repairs and maintenance, and then about 5% of the effective gross income for property management. Once the operating expenses are deducted, we take that off of the gross income to come up with a net operating income, and then that's capitalized. So we'll look at capitalization rates in the market. We'll see that we can see what the market rates are, those cap rates are. Those are can be derived from sales. Sometimes MLS will have information about the income and expenses where we can do our calculations. Sometimes other other sources also have cap rates. So once we have that, we capitalize the net operating income and come up with a market value. And so the final step for this report or this property was to reconcile it. So right now we have two values: the direct comparison, income approach. In this case, the direct comparison was slightly lower than the approach, but we did rely on the income approach because of its income generating capabilities. So it is an income producing property. Like I said before, it's lease fee. And so we were able to use because there's leases attached to it, we did a lease fee interest. And so at that point, we had determined that the value came from the income approach. And so that's the income, or sorry, that's the appraisal report process, the direct comparison, income approach. We can also, if you have any questions about the cost approach or any other properties, feel free to ask. But yeah, that's kind of an appraisal process.
Well, I mean, that was really thorough, Rebecca, and I really appreciate you taking the time today to do that. We did have a question from Sean Sweeney. Mr. Sweeney is in negotiations to establish his tennis academy. It's called Score Academy. It's actually, I think, going to be Score Tennis and Pickleball Academy, but it will be on leased land. So if Sean, builds a building that has, I don't know, 6 or 8 tennis courts in it, and maybe 6 or 8 or 10 pickleball courts in it, and he has an active business on, I don't know, 3, 5, 6, 7 acres, but it's on a long-term land lease, how would you appraise that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So we would definitely look at the land lease. We'd have to likely look at the value of the land as well as the value of the property. A lot of times with these kind of properties that not only are buildings, but there's value towards the business that's attributed to the property. For example, a campground, or in this case, tennis courts. We do a going concern approach as well, which includes the business valuation. And so that's likely the approach we do. We look at kind of all not only the income of the lease, whatever leases are in place, but also we look at the income from the business value as well.
Yeah, and Sean, it's not unusual to ask an appraiser to value a building or a business on a land lease. I mean, if you think about Place Ville Marie, Rebecca, you may not know the building, but Place Ville Marie is one of the big buildings in Montreal. It's on a land lease. 40 Wall Street in New York City is on a land lease. So you have the land lease, which creates value for the land, and then you have the income from the building, or in your case, the building and the business, that creates value. And there really are, I think they're two separate values. Would you agree with that, Rebecca?
Yeah, it really often depends on what the lender wants, but we'll often, as you saw in this case study, we can do multiple values under one report. So yeah, we could look at it from a land value perspective, and of course take into consideration the lease, and we can also look at it from a property perspective.
So Sean, do you have a follow-up question for Rebecca?
No, that's great so far. Thank you, Bruce and Rebecca. I really appreciate it.
So we'll cross that bridge, Sean, together when we come to it, and we'll have Rebecca on speed dial. All right, listen,
Happy to help.
I appreciate you guys hanging in almost to the end. We're losing some of our audience. It's getting late, but I am going to spend no more than 5 or 6 or 7 minutes on the model that I promised you, and then that's it. All right. So hang on a second, you guys. I'm going to share my screen, and I'll blitz through this. Let me see if I can find the slide deck. Yeah. What I wanted to show you is something, I call it a new model, but it's really not a new model. It goes back at least 100 years. And the problem that I'm finding is a lot of my clients, I have about 2,500 coaching clients in the States and in Canada, and probably another 10,000 people that I talk to on a fairly regular basis. Many of them own farmland. And we heard from Julian earlier about community gardens in Rockland, which apparently are having some success, right, Aaron? And so I wanted to show you, this is 15 acres of really good quality agricultural land. It's about a half an hour, 40 minutes south of Ottawa. And a client of mine owns it, and he is renting it to a local farmer who grows probably cash crops here, and he gets somewhere between $70 and $100 per year. That really means per season, per acre. So if he gets $100 per acre from the farmer to plant whatever he's going to plant here, his total revenue from this 15 acres would be $1,500, which is not very much money from 15 acres. And I've been talking to him about a very old model. So I call it a new model, but it really is a Russian model that goes back at least 100 years. And it's called the Russian Dashnik movement. Dashnik is just simply a Russian word meaning gardener. And this is how Russia basically fed itself, and probably still does to this day. And that is, the Dashniks are gardeners, and they would typically have 1 hectare of land, so about 2.5 acres of land, and they would intensively cultivate that, and it would produce enough fruits and vegetables and nuts, and sometimes poultry and animals as well, to feed their family and a few others. And it was almost all of it organic, and almost all of it was with minimal automation, all right? So a lot of hard work. And then, of course, over the last 100+ years, they've been adding bunkies to it, because if you're a Russian, you work hard. And then at the end of the day, my grandfather was a Russian, by the way, you would sit around, you'd play your balalaika, and you drink vodka. And maybe you would be a little too tipsy to go home, and you'd crash in your bunkie. But your bunkie would also have your tools in it and such like. Now, Aaron, you should recognize some of these buildings, especially on the top left. They're not that different from the buildings that you built at Hammond Hill. And when I said it goes back 100 years, my slides are reminding me, whoops, I meant to say add another 0. 1,000 years the Russians have been doing this. All right. And you can see here that they spend an average of 17 hours a week during the season. The Russian season is very similar to Canada. We get about 113 days in Eastern Ontario. In Southern Ontario, it's probably about 120 to 125 days. So their season's a little longer, but not that much longer. And 1 hectare can support a family of 4 with a surplus, so they can actually sell some or trade some away. And so what I said to my client is this. What if he were to basically establish community gardens on this 15 acres, but with a little bit of a difference? What if he were to put some of these bunkies? And unfortunately, Aaron, the buildings, the tiny homes that you build at Small Living Company would be too expensive for this model, right? So that where you're spending $100,000 on a building, that doesn't work. But some of these bunkies, they're just basically they might be 3 seasons and possibly 4 if you really want to work at it, but they're literally just a very small bunkie where you might have 4 bunks in there. You might come with your kids and you might have your little garden plot. And I call this the white picket fence. So what if my client were to divide this 15 acres up into not 2 community gardens, which could be very small, but something a little bit bigger, maybe 5,000 square feet each, with white picket fence and a little bunkie? Would he be able to find a market for that? BunkyLife.com is well known. They've been on what's that show on TV, where you go and you pitch to the dragon. It's not Dragon's Den.
Yeah.
What's it called in the States? Shark Den or something?
I'm not sure.
Doesn't matter. Dragons. They actually pitched, and they were successful pitching this idea. So you can get one of their kits, and they're very easy to put together. You don't even need a screwdriver. You can put these things together. It would probably take me 3 days to put it together, but somebody like Aaron would probably put it together in half a day. You could buy them for about 10 grand, and they're quite nice. So look at the numbers here. If my client bought 30 of these bunkies and created 30 gardens with it on his 15 acres, we think he'll end up with about $170,000 to $180,000 of gross income. He'll have some expenses against it, which is this number in red. He might make as much as $110,000 to $120,000 a year from these gardens and bunkies. Which means, instead of getting $1,500 a year, he might get $110,000 or $120,000 of net income from that 15 acres. That is a big difference. And I would like some of the farmers that I work with to do it as well. I mean, they have some of clients have 300 acres or 3,000 acres, and the ones in the Midwest and out West, they can have much bigger properties. But part of the property should be done this way for a whole lot of reasons, not just to make some more money, but for other reasons as well. And so I looked at it. I mean, I don't know if Rebecca's still, Rebecca, are you still on the call? Maybe she dropped off, doesn't matter. But, if you apply a 6.5% cap rate to $117,600 of income, that means that 15 acres could be worth $1.8 million, which works out to $120,000 an acre. My client bought this for $11,500 an acre. So you can see what the implications of the model is. And if you look at some of the people who are doing this in the area, people like Mike's Garden Harvest in Orleans, with their garden plots, and some of their plots are really tiny. I mean, you can see here on this screen here, 10 feet by 12 feet, which is very small, to 40 by 12 feet. It's a going concern. And Mike provides irrigation, preparation of the land, picnic spot, which I would call a playland. They'll test the soil for you. They'll help you make sure it's fertile. They'll help you with strategies to keep the weeds away. And I had to put this in here. You could see that it was sold out, and it has been sold out, I think, for the last 4 or 5 years. And here's some pictures of Mike's Garden Harvest. This is Mike down here. He's at a number of farmers markets, but this is a very family thing. So it's not just a model about making some money. It's also about creating community. And it's a lot of fun to do it with your kids and your grandkids. And I think I have another picture of Mike. There it is. And I had to show some of the buildings that Aaron has been building. I mean, if we could afford it, these would be fantastic to add, but maybe that's, phase 2 or phase 3 or stage 2 or stage 3, Aaron. But these are built buildings that Aaron builds, and they're beautiful. They're certainly much nicer than you would get from Bunkie Life, but they're also a lot more expensive. So I wanted to show that. The last slide I think I'll show, or the last couple of slides, because I've kept you over time, is I talked to Farm Credit Corp about this last week or this week, I don't remember, very recently. And Farm Credit Corp is all over this. They like the idea of keeping more agricultural land in production and having more people introduced to farming and grow local. Like I said earlier when we were talking with Julian, your ROI on your home garden can be as high as 1,000% a year. So from the point of view of the tenant, if you will, it's a pretty good investment too. So Farm Credit Corp, or Farm Credit Canada as they're now called, they will provide operating loans for this kind of a business, machinery and equipment loans, real estate loans like mortgages, agribusiness loans, farm improvement loans, and guess what? They're also all over the idea of agritainment uses, which is kind of what this is, farm gate marketing stalls, a farm stay network, which means, where people could stay on the farm, which obviously this is. And the only thing that they don't do, this is interesting, guys, the only thing they won't do is they don't do farm to restaurant. So you couldn't put a restaurant on your farm and get them to finance it for you, which I think is unfortunate. I'm going to talk to them about maybe changing the rules, because if you go to France, I've done tours in France of their wine country. I mean, it's a fantastic thing. You could stay on these wineries. And you can also go and get fabulous meals and obviously taste their wines as well. So I put in here as well, contact information at Farm Credit Corp. I'm going to copy this into the chat box just before we break. But I really like this young woman. Her name's Carol Ann Nadeau, and you can see her contact information here. And like I said, I will put that in the chat box. If any of you are interested, you could reach out to her for financing. But I really like this model, and if I were a little bit younger, I would probably do something myself in this area. All right, so here we go. I'll put it in the chat box. If you want it, you have to copy it out. You got like a minute to do that. Aaron, where are you? Thank you for everything you've done over the last 3 months. Thank you for the people who've watched this on replay, and thank you for the people who stayed with us right to the end today. It means a lot to me. Aaron, did you want to talk about so your idea of maybe meeting up on Hammond Hill in August?
Yeah, I kind of thought that maybe we do like a little bonus course. Maybe we do a meetup. If people want to come to the hill, I'll take care of the beer and the pizza. there's got to be some advantages to own a brewery. So I thought it's great to meet people in person. Like I love the virtual tour,
100%.
but I think getting back to being in person, and we can talk a little bit more about the discount modeling is still available to everyone. We can go through that in person, which I think is more beneficial than overline. So Bruce and I will work through some details on timing and whatnot, but wanted to extend the Olive Garden and have a chance to sit down and break bread together and maybe have a beer or two. And I think it's a really fitting way to end a course, which I've really enjoyed being a part of. So thank you very much for having me.
Well, it was a wonderful experience for me as well. And, you know, I don't know how many more of these courses I have in me, you know, Aaron, but having you as a co-presenter here and co-teacher was fantastic. And thank you, Janice and Dennis and Ida and Paula and everybody else, Harsh, Dustin, everybody for sticking with us. And Jordan, I'm sure I'll be seeing you soon as well. But there are a lot of really great ideas. And what I would say is right now, this is the last comment I make, promise. What I would say, the last thing I'll say, thank you, Michael, too. The last thing I'll say is there is a lot of fear in around the world now about where's the economy going, where's the international order going. You know, there's war, there's interest rate hikes seemingly every couple of months. So there's a lot of fear out there. And President Roosevelt in the 1930s, when there was a Great Depression, which was much worse than we're experiencing now, and there was about to be the worst world war ever, probably, let's hope, said the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And fear generally creates panic, and panic creates all kinds of things: bank runs, real estate values dropping, people stop investing, people stop spending, people hide, you know, from each other. I would caution you not to act out of fear. People, human beings, are much more fearful of loss than they desire gain. So people are more afraid to lose money than they are to wishing to make money. And in my opinion, that is a fear that paralyzes you and leads you to lead something that is not your best life. So I don't know if it makes sense to you, but I have fear. You know, I don't like the fact that my interest rates are going from 3% to 6 or 7%. Trust me, I don't like that. It's not something I enjoy. But I try not to act irrationally. I try not to react out of fear. And I believe that the opportunities have never been greater than they are today. I mean that. So I think you go forward with optimism. If you have the right business model, we've talked a lot about this. If you have the right business model, whether it's real estate or technology or services or anything else, there's opportunity to make incredible amounts of money. We have tried to help you with that, and I hope we've succeeded. See you, everybody. Thanks again.